We are in an era where depression seems to be on its peak. Everyone knows at least one or two persons that are close to them dealing with depression. When you look at this, it feels quite alarming that the number of depressed people is growing day by day. But what is most alarming is the fact that despite depression having coverage for the past 2 decades, almost nothing has changed. I would even argue that things became worse. And let me explain why.
When I interviewed her, she said, I was singing, "Where have all the flowers gone?" over and over to occupy my mind. I was singing to blot out the things my mind was saying, which were, you are nothing. You are nobody. You don't even deserve to live. And that was when I really started thinking about killing myself. You don't think in depression that you've put on a gray veil and are seeing the world through the haze of a bad mood. You think that the veil has been taken away, the veil of happiness, and that now you're seeing truly.
Let me tell you what most people know about depression. We are sad, extremely sad. It is a genetic gene that gets triggered by tragic events, like the death of one's love. We lose touch of reality in such a way that it might even be challenging to focus on our life. We are stuck in bed, incapable of making efforts because we aren't motivated enough. We feel exhausted. This is roughly what we are taught of depression. I have heard it from friends talking about it over coffee, or from coworkers at school, from psychologists, and so on. Yet, despite the coverage of depression with campaigns by the government or organisms, despite the coverage on the media and social media, we are, however, still extremely depressed. And this means that there is a lot about depression that we do not understand yet. We do not know precisely where it is coming from. We have a lot of theories on it, like genetics or environment, social status, poverty, violence. But then when you look around you, when people talk about their life, it feels everyone has somewhat of a depressive manners, thoughts, behavior. Why? Jordan Peterson said this.
Well, my family, going back several generations, has been cursed with a particularly vicious form of depression. And so it's been quite a catastrophe. It really affected my grandfather for decades. He was immobilized, I would say, after the death of his father. It was really awful. And it hit my father when he was in his late 40s. There were signs of it before that, especially in the winter. And my dad's a very competent person, and so the fact that took him down to a large degree was a shock to everyone that knew him, including him. And then it affected me, and it affected my daughter and a number of cousins, and it's really pervasive. And so it's nasty.
Then there's this professor, Andrew Solomon, that shares something very interesting.
I went a few years ago to a conference, and on Friday of the 3-day conference, one of the participants took me aside and she said, I suffer from depression, and I'm a little embarrassed about it, but I've been taking this medication, and I just wanted to ask you what you think. And so I did my best to give her such advice as I could. And then she said, my husband would never understand this. He's really the kind of guy to whom this wouldn't make any sense. So it's just between us. And I said, yes, that's fine. On Sunday at the same conference, her husband took me aside. And he said, my wife wouldn't think that I was really much of a guy if she knew this, but I've been dealing with this depression, and I'm taking some medication, and I wondered what you think. They were hiding the same medication in 2 different places in the same bedroom. And I said that I thought communication within the marriage might be triggering some of their problems.
I think those 2 examples are significant to keep in mind for the rest of the video. Now, depression is many things. It includes sadness, but it is not just about being sad. It is about being sad to an extreme level that even some people have described it as a slow path to death.
What it is that causes some people to be more resilient than other people? What are the mechanisms that allow people to survive? And I went out and I interviewed person after person who was suffering with depression. One of the first people I interviewed described depression as a slower way of being dead.
And let's remember, depression does lead to suicide. So the sadness is so much intense than what we think. Let's say it is a sadness that brings such great emotional pain within a person that it can push him or her to harm oneself, like cutting the skin with a knife, or to suicide. But I think there is more into this intense sorrow. I would like to point out, even from personal experiences, that more often than not, we have delusions that make us sad. Thoughts that pop in our head and that just seem not to go away, and that we started to believe because we hear those thoughts repeatedly over and over and over. You are pathetic. No one understands you. Nobody loves you. I am alone. You are pathetic. Nobody loves you. No one understands. Nobody loves you. Pathetic. Pathetic. And it goes on like this.
It's easier to help schizophrenics who perceive that there's something foreign inside of them that needs to be exorcised. But it's difficult with depressives because we believe we are seeing the truth. But the truth lies. I became obsessed with that sentence, but the truth lies. And I discovered as I talked to depressive people that they have many delusional perceptions.
Those delusions means that it is a distorted vision of our reality. Those delusions are mostly based out of our feelings, because our emotions override, most of the time, our rationality. And this is also something to keep in mind for the future in this video. And I think the most fascinating part of it all is that we tend to justify those delusions, either by thinking rationally or by feeding our delusion with more delusions. It ends up with a blended and mixed cooked right on point for a recipe that makes us and keeps us depressed. I am alone because no one loves me. No one understands me. I'm gonna be such a burden to everyone around. I feel so helpless. There is nothing that can be done. Here's how Peterson talks about this.
So you don't want to open the door so that every possible snake comes crawling through, because that's a pathway to depression. And you actually see that happening in depressed people, is that every small event produces a cascade through their entire value system, and they end up saying, well, that's just another reason that I should jump off a bridge. And they really see it that way. It's really awful because they've got no defenses. It's like, well, I didn't do so well in this course. It's like I'm going to get a bad mark in the exam. I'm going to get a bad mark in the course. That's going to screw up my ability to finish my degree. I'm never going to get into the field of my choice. It's just another piece of indication that I'm useless and that life isn't worthwhile. Bang, I'm going to jump off a bridge. One of the rules is you want to constrain the anomalous event to the minimal necessary domain. It's really, really important. You want to do that when you're arguing with your partner, which you'll do all the time. We have an argument. Well, I should never have married you. It's like, no, that's not the first response. That's a bad response. Or here's a really good one. You've always done that sort of thing, and you always will. It's like, oh, good, great. It's like the only answer to that is to hit someone. Because like you're done, right? You're like that. You've always been like that. There isn't a chance that you can be repaired, and none of it is acceptable. It's like the person's going to fight with you right away, because what else are they going to do? So what you want to do is you want to minimize, it isn't rationalization. You want to say, okay, this person did something that disrupted our joint map. Okay, what's the smallest possible thing they could do to put it back together? And you have to know. Well, we need to make a plan so you don't do it again. Or we need to have a discussion so that you know that it wasn't a good thing to do. But I'm not going to go after your whole character. I'm going to say, when I come home, and you're watching TV, just come to the door and say hello. Not, don't you love me, or something like that. It's like, no, you just have to walk to the door and like give me a hug or something, and then that's good enough. And so then the other person might be able to tolerate that much corrective information, maybe, if you're kind of nice about it, and you also understand that they're probably going to have something equally horrible to say about you in the next 15 minutes, because you're going to do something stupid. And if you're really depressed, it's like each of those things hits you with the certainty of truth. It's really not good.
As we are described as emotional and social beings, it comes to logic that our emotions and feelings can override our rationality. Though, isn't it our rationality that actually makes us different from animals? Food for thought. Nonetheless, depression is one hell of a thing. From personal to even expert experiences, when we are during those delusions, no matter how rational and factual we can be, even if we are aware that we are delusional at that moment, it feels we are stuck in a kind of broken record.
One of the things that often gets lost in discussions of depression is that you know it's ridiculous. You know it's ridiculous while you're experiencing it. You know that most people manage to listen to their messages and eat lunch and organize themselves to take a shower and go out the front door, and that it's not a big deal. And yet, you are nonetheless in its grip, and you are unable to figure out any way around it.
Now let's talk a bit scientific. Depression also has cognitive effects on us. When we talk about cognitive, we talk about what is going on between the neurons of our brain. Those are the roads that our thoughts take, our concentration, and many other things so that we can normally function in our day-to-day life. Let me give you a simple example. When you have a headache or a migraine, there is a lot of things that stop working fine. Like your eyes can be sensitive to light, you can't understand what someone is saying, or you simply feel like you lack of focus at work or in class because your brain is distracted by this pain in your head. Now, let's understand from a depression point of view. A lot of depressed people experience something similar. They would say, we can't think as straight as before, and we can't focus, we can't seem to remember the important stuff, or just even this general stuff, and I can't seem to take any good decision, or even just take any decision. This is my personal opinion, but I think that these cognitive dysfunction increase the impact of the delusion we are having during depressive moment. And this all leads to how it affects us physically. Depression does affect our health and our body. You would feel low energy and probably would want to sleep more than usual. Heck, when I was depressed, I could not even get out of my bed. I would just lay there for hours and on. And that's where health problems can start appearing. Since our body does not move as it used to, we become weak. Pain in joints like the knees or wrist, pain in the back, pain in the neck. When we say that depression can increase heart condition, it's because if you don't move all day for 6 months, well, your heart is not able to pump as it used to, and slowly, your own heart becomes weak. Now, considering all this, you might have heard that exercising helps you feel better. And also your appearance maybe would need a little exercise. You either became fat because you binge ate a lot, or you became too skinny that you want to gain some muscles and weight. In short, you probably got motivated and you probably tried because you want to feel better. You want to look good. Who doesn't? But then you realize, heck, it hurts. Every portion of your body hurts. You can't breathe properly and your heart is pounding like crazy. Since your heart is not used anymore to working like it used to, it's like, what am I supposed to do? What am I supposed to do now? I can't pump. And that's without counting all your joints that just... all that to end up to a loss of interest, motivation, and just going back to your depression, welcoming you with arms wide open. I will never succeed. I'm ugly, fat, My body hurts so much I can't possibly recover. I can't do it. I can't. Though we have understood a bit better now what is depression roughly, we still are not sure why it occurs.
You know, when you hear about the clinical evidence in their favor being iffy, and that's partly because the diagnosis of depression isn't very well formulated. It's very different to have a terrible life than to be depressed. And antidepressants can only help you so much if you have a terrible life. So, yeah.
And honestly, even I think that it is still in the dark. But let me tell you what I think are the reasons why we became so depressed over time. Now let's talk a bit brain. In our brains, we have a lot of parts like the cortex or the thalamus. But the most powerful part of the brain is this tiny little part called the amygdala. Now, in another video, we can talk about the brain for hours about it and its function, and the brain is quite fascinating. But right now, what we are interested in is where the delusions come despite knowing that they are delusions. Now, to think rationally, we need our cortex or cerebral cortex. This big boy here is what we use to process information from the outer world, like hearing, touching, smelling. It is what we are using to reason and perceive the world that surrounds us. It is also the most conscious part of our brain, and this is something to note. Now, with that said, the cortex also has other tasks, like it attaches meanings and memories to our perception of the world. Let me explain. You don't see an old man and hear his voice, but you recognize him as your grandpa, and you understand the meaning of the sounds he's making. Like, I could understand when my grandpa would be angry, while someone totally unknown of him wouldn't get that he is indeed mad. And you know you don't want to mess with grandpa when he's angry. But you will say, Safia, we weren't supposed to talk about the amygdala, which is supposed to be the most powerful part of the brain. Well, yes, darling, it is. And that's what we will dig right into it. Now, what I read about it is mostly coming from this book, Rewire Your Anxious Brain. And I know it might not be 100% accurate for depression, but I believe I'm onto something. As I said before, depression, in my opinion and understanding, is mostly coming from a distorted vision of reality. And those visions are coming from delusions that we tell ourselves. But those delusions started somewhere at first, and we can't always explain in words where it is coming from. Now, before we get into our little scientific talk, I would like you to know that what we hear the most about depression is that it is triggered by a certain kind of trauma. And that trauma is so emotionally hard for us that it can bring us down emotionally. Death of a loved one, violence in childhood, neglection in childhood, oppression, isolation, and much more trauma. Anything that is emotionally powerful enough that can overpass our ability to move on from this bad situation. And this ability of adaptation is mostly coming from our cortex, which help us understand and making logical decisions that are beneficial for ourselves, even though our cortex can act a little bit distorted sometimes, and I will explain a little later on. So when it comes to the amygdala, it is a part of our brain that is mostly unconscious. So we do not have any actual thought process in that part of the brain. Obviously, all the thoughts that you are having typically are coming from the cortex, your neurons basically. Now, the amygdala mostly controls the release of hormones and activates areas of the brain that can trigger a physical reaction. So that's why this bad boy is extremely powerful, because it has this shortcut to our body. Also, our body, the amygdala, is the source of many of our emotional reactions, whether they are positive or negative. Let me give you 2 examples. When someone comes extra close to you and violates your personal place, your little bubble, well, you might just want to punch that person in the face. That's basically your amygdala that produces this kind of rage inside you. That is probably because of an old or bad experience with people touching you. Maybe like a case of rape, for example. On the other hand, if you meet someone that looks like your grandma, and you feel a kind of warm, affectionate feeling for the old lady that you just have met, well, that's our old friend, the amygdala again, where it is accessing pleasant emotional memories. Now, this kind of gives already a good explanation onto what the amygdala is actually capable of. I also want to mention that the amygdala has many parts within it that have different kind of functionality. But the important thing that you need to remember is that the amygdala forms and recall emotional memories. And so if you understand this, your emotional reactions will make much more sense. Now obviously the book I was reading was about anxiety, panic, worries, fears, which do have a role in depression, because if we say, no one understands me, but you wish that someone understands you, and if someone does, then you would be delighted, then it does feed into the fear of not being understood. This is why a lot of people do not talk much about their depression and hides it exceptionally well. Because if you open yourself to someone and that person, despite having listened to you thoroughly, that person would maybe still be oblivious to the pain that you are going through, it probably will hurt you even more. I get that. I have been hurt like that. I think that pretty much everyone has been. So the association of fear, which is a negative emotion, to speaking is how the emotional memories form. And if ever someone asks you later on to talk about yourself or your pain, it can recall this emotional memory, and then you would start feeling anxiety or fear. Obviously, this can also apply to sadness. Emotional memories are not always humans or anxious reaction. Let's say a song was playing in the background of a car accident and your spouse died in that accident. You loved your spouse very much and you had extremely great moments with him or her. Now, your amygdala will associate the song that you were listening to during this tragic car accident where your spouse died. I can guarantee you that this song will make you tear up whenever you would listen back to it. Because the emotional memory from the tragedy has been formed, and if it is recalled by the trigger of the song, despite you maybe not remembering right away about it, your body will surely start reacting. And now, this is extremely powerful, right? So if a traumatic event in our life can be constantly being reminded in a way that we have no control of, then it inclines a person to start those delusions. Having your head in this kind of negative neurological response to the world will simply begin building up with time. So maybe you start by the song which is equal to the tragic accident. Then you tell yourself, life is unfair. No one can get it because this wouldn't happen to them. You start isolating yourself because you grieve the relationship you once had. And you seem to just keep on sinking. And throughout all this journey of yours to the bottom of the abyss, you keep on forming those emotional memories that start to override everything else. Because those emotional memories can disable you right away. Even if you are aware logically that you are not supposed to be that way, well, you still strongly feel that way inside. And this is due because the information that you're receiving is not going through your cortex right away. When an emotional memory is coming through, it goes directly to your amygdala, which controls your bodily reaction. I think maybe that this is also why we have difficulty to think, or that we feel in slow-mo, because it's not going directly to your cortex that understand and rationalize that external information. Instead, it goes to your cortex when it is too late. And when it finally goes to your cortex, well, everything gets distorted because we do not understand where the strong emotional feeling comes first. And it won't make sense. And no matter how much we are trying to get out of it logically, it does not work. And at the end, we end up feeding this emotional memory by justifying it in a delusional way. Now, don't get me wrong. The amygdala is a fantastic tool of humans that can help us react in a very instinctively way. So if we look carefully, it is mostly an evolution-based safety measure. I would say maladaptive to our world today, and this for many reasons.
And I said to myself, well, what is the conclusion? How did those people who have better lives, even with bigger depression, manage to get through? What is the mechanism of resilience? And what I came up with over time was that the people who deny their experience, the ones who say I was depressed a long time ago and I never want to think about it again and I'm not going to look at it and I'm just going to get on with my life, ironically, those are the people who are most enslaved by what they have. Shutting out the depression strengthens it. While you hide from it, it grows. And the people who do better are the ones who are able to tolerate the fact that they have this condition. Those who can tolerate their depression are the ones who achieve resilience.
Depression is vicious, not because we are extremely sad and that an event has been created, but it is vicious because we have no idea what the amygdala has associated an event to sorrowful and painful emotions. When we say that childhood has a strong influence on how we are in adulthood, we mostly refer to the amygdala that shapes our emotional responses to the outer world. The solution for depression, in my opinion, is first to understand the triggers that make the amygdala recall the emotional memories. Notice when you start feeling heavy-hearted or that tears are coming up, that your throat is sore. When you start feeling so empty inside, numb even. Why? What was the trigger? When you understand this trigger, you need to rewire your brain. Those triggers are usually what is called a stimuli, basically a stimulation, either from the eyes, what you see, or nose, what you smell, or skin, what you touch. And those things comes from objects, events, or situations that you see, hear, feel, smell, or experience. And by doing so, the formation of emotional memory is basically learning how to be sad, or how to fear, how to be anxious. It's our amygdala that is learning all those negative feelings. As said before, it is not supposed to be logical, but lucky you. Your cortex is here to help you understand yourself to be able to cope with the amygdala, and that is by having an in-depth understanding of your own triggers, of your own emotion, and to train your brain in rewiring the amygdala in an effective way. Knowledge of yourself is the key. That means facing yourself. You face it and analyze why it is there. Don't try to justify it, because you will surely want to. But try to understand the root. And that is basically called, in the psychological, neurological field, exposure-based treatment. This is all to give new experiences to the amygdala to associate with. That it's not the song that you have listened to during the accident that actually killed your wife or your husband. And that is the first step to recovery. Now, let's talk about another thing that will help you along the way. Your cortex also has a role in your depression, and you need to take care of it. By doing so, understand your thought patterns. If you are having more negative or pessimistic thoughts, what started those chains of thoughts? Understand it is mostly the negative thoughts that you have which creates this feeling of discouragement and wanting to give up. Remember, when you tried to work out but got discouraged because your body's too weak, well, your cortex is probably working in a pessimistic way at that moment. To counter this, you will need to keep on doing your workout, despite the physical pain. Remind yourself of the benefit in the long term. Remind yourself why you are doing it. Rationalize your thoughts on the positive side. Don't try to be perfect. And I underline this. Don't try to be perfect. Don't rely on motivation. Not at the beginning, at least. You need to make yourself disciplined, and when you will see result in your mood or your body, then you will naturally get more positive and motivated to continue. But just hang in there until this moment. The first step is always the hardest, but don't let your negative thoughts stop you. Push through the waves, and you will be proud of yourself when the storm of negativity slowly fades away.
Valuing one's depression does not prevent a relapse, but it may make the prospect of relapse, and even relapse itself, easier to tolerate. The question is not so much of finding great meaning and deciding your depression has been very meaningful. It's of seeking that meaning and thinking when it comes again, this will be hellish, but I will learn something from it. I had learned in my own depression how big an emotion can be, how it can be more real than facts. And I have found that that experience has allowed me to experience positive emotion in a more intense and more focused way. The opposite of depression is not happiness, but vitality.
From all this said, this is one part I did not talk much about, but I would like to touch briefly. Remember when I said that the amygdala is maladaptive to the world we are living in today? I would like to expand on this and add that the amygdala was great for much more physical life, like hunting, working in the field, fighting. But now we have evolved a lot. We have technology that help us in the field. We don't need to hunt anymore to survive. We don't go to war as much as we used to. We don't have diseases as we used to. Our life became extremely easy, and this is where we are maladapted to our world. We are incredibly free in our life. So free that our amygdala, that is supposed to associate and form emotional memory to get us through hard situations, makes us dysfunction instead, because the method that it is using is becoming outdated. And this is the reason why we are becoming more and more depressed, despite the awareness being raised in the past 2 decades. We just started to understand how to deal with our emotions. And yet there is not a lot of people aware of the technical part of our brain and emotions. Why do certain pills do make us feel better? And why aren't we taught about how to get in touch with ourselves in more depth? Instead of trying to work onto ourselves and understanding, we have machines that keep us in a wrong behavioral pattern where everyone seems oblivious to their own improvement. Bro, just make us laugh, okay? Your psychological stuff or philosophy shit don't interest me. And please, don't even start with politics. It might take some years before we finally start being able to have an emotional grip onto our amygdala. But trust me, if we begin by changing ourselves now, even just with our own depression, we will be able to change so much more in the future, and your brain, trust me, your brain will be your best ally. Thank you for having watched this video, and I will see you in the next one. Also, if you made it to the end, please subscribe, leave a like, and let us know your thoughts in the comment section.